want you to be inspired. They don't want you to be motivated. They don't want you to win. So I'm gonna eat a cheeseburger. And become a billionaire. They didn't believe in us. God did.
I'm gonna eat a cheeseburger and become a billionaire.
Bridge the gap between what she's obviously figured out as a formal training experience.
Sure.
And the more casual day-to-day when you're maybe not at that level. Because they're...
What do you mean by that?
So I don't leave the collar on when she sleeps.
Sure.
So when we get up in the morning first thing, she's responsive, but not as tight as when you're training.
So step one is not separating in your mind training time versus real life time, right? The only thing you need to separate in your mind is, does she have the collar on or does she not have the collar on? Or more specifically, because it's not just about the collar, are you in a position to enforce it or are you not in a position to enforce it, right? So where I find things fall apart with people who say, like, you know, in my training sessions things are great, but day to day stuff like that, they get a little bit sloppy with it, is they are constantly asking their dog to do things when they're not in a position to back it up, right? So what happens immediately is the dog realizes sometimes you enforce things very strictly and very clear, and sometimes I can get away with 2 sit commands, you know, 2 no's before, you know what I mean, like stuff like that. So you got to kind of separate that, right? And, you know, be very strategic about, if the collar is not on, literally just don't ask her to do anything. And then, in addition to that, make sure that you have the collar on more often throughout the day so that you could start working things like an impromptu training session, right? So let's say, okay, let's say hypothetically, right, we're just hanging out right now, whatever, you know, and, you know, we haven't done a training session with her in 2 hours, 3 hours, something like that. And, you know, I'm like, all right, well, this is a real life situation. She's comfortable over there lounging or this or that, right? I wanna practice something and just kind of, you know, simulate this and test it a little bit, right? You would have to immediately, before you even ask it, like, okay, let me turn on training mode for a second. You give your initial command, right? So let's say you're gonna work a come command. You would tell her, come. Great. And if she does it, fantastic. If she doesn't do it, you enforce it just as strictly as you would in a training session, right? So she realizes, regardless of the setting, regardless if I'm comfortable laying on the couch or we just finished working 15 different sits and I'm really kind of gung-ho engaged, I know that if this cue is given, it will always be enforced in this way. Right? So that will allow her to get quicker with turning it on, because she realizes she's not going to get away with not doing it, right? Or she's not going to get away with giving the command 2 times or 3 times before there's some sort of accountability for it, right? I see a lot of people, and people will even do this in their training session. We talked about this, I think, like session 2 or something like that, right? Where you said, you know, the first rep or 2, she's a little bit slow, right? And a lot of times the reason why I find that's the case is sometimes we take a minute to get into training mode as well. So our first rep or 2 that we do with the dog is a little bit sloppy with how we enforce it before we get into the groove, right? Where when I take a dog out for a training session, if we're doing a board and train or if we're doing a one-on-one class or something like that, from the second I give a command, it's enforced the exact same way, right? So there's never any sort of like slop that's going to confuse the dog.
No, that makes sense.
So, come. So you want to set up more mock impromptu training sessions and less long drawn out ones. So instead of sitting down and doing 20-minute long sessions, 25-minute long sessions, do 3 2-minute sessions where you just work 2 sit stays or something like that, you know? Come on.
I was thinking about that when
Sit.
a lot of different environments, and so you can create that, like, I'm the cue, it's not here we are.
Yeah, exactly. Sit. Good. And in addition to that, you got no. Now right there, she fixed herself, obviously, when I said no and tapped. Sit. But I still went back and re-gave that command to reset her into position, right? Our no marker is basically like we're terminating a behavior, right? So when I say no and correct, we're done with whatever we're working on, which is why some of those reps, once I said no, I didn't rush to go fix her at all, right? We were done with it, right? When I go to put you back in, that's when we're restarting the picture, you know? Come. So, in addition to that, changing pictures here, what I'm gonna do, no, come, is I'm gonna walk her in here for a second. I'm gonna put her into a sit in here. Sit. Good. And then we're actually gonna go out this way. And we'll see if first and foremost, obviously the out of sight, if she kind of tries to come around. If not, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna give the come command from afar, right? Or out of sight, I should say. And same deal, just changing the picture, seeing how she does with it. I'll go over here where she can't see me. Come. Now she's got to pick the right person. Wow, good job. That's pretty good. All right, pick a spot somewhere, put her into a sit, and then we're just gonna kind of chat about some of this for a minute. Cool, you can just leave her there. We'll use this as an opportunity to have her hold it. She looks awesome. I mean, she's obviously progressed nicely. All of the things we've worked on, she's done very, very well with. You know, your timing looks pretty good with everything. It sounds to me like the biggest things to work on at this point are gonna be simulating more real life training sessions. So as opposed to like sitting down and doing 15 minutes of training, just do a random 1 or 2 commands, but enforce it very strictly, right? Then do another random 1 or 2 commands and enforce it strictly. And you really wanna implement this and just apply it to your day-to-day like that in a way where you're setting her up where randomly she could be asked to do something at any time, and randomly it will be enforced anytime, right? As opposed to it's only enforced in the training session.
I was thinking one of your trainers had her lanyard on.
Yeah, it's got the lanyard in the box.
The right time for that.
Yeah, it makes it convenient for sure, you know, so you could have it on you, but you know, even past that, you don't necessarily need to have it on you at all times. It's just if you're gonna ask something, just know where it is.
Well, but that's the so she doesn't see me go get the thing.
Sure, yeah.
It's just,
Yep, 100%.
I feel like we've made that connection, and so it really is just me sort of figuring out implementation, but also being
100%.
consistent for myself.
100%. Yeah. No, she's done great, you know, and like I said, distractions and stuff, she's proven she could work through, and she's stayed focused and compliant with stuff, so that's wonderful.
We struggled for a little bit.
Well, I think the struggle really was more, you know, it's not like you have a ton of time with him left, you know, and it kind of, I'm sure, felt like to some extent, like we're taking a step back with him, you know. I think it's more kind of, you know, because we don't have a lot of time and it feels like we were taking a step back with him with some of those things. It's like, I think it's easy to paint a picture in your head of like, you know, we should see this go like from like bad to really, really good like very quickly, you know? Where he just needed a couple of days to like really get back in the groove of things, and he looks, again, I don't see any problems. You know, I don't see any problems with anything he just did. Two.
Puppy things, you know?
Puppy things. How's he doing?
Good.
Good?
Yeah.
Any big issues?
Things are, besides the puppy stuff, he's jumping on a lot of things now.
Okay. What kind of things is he jumping on? Like fully on it? Oh, nice.
Eats the flowers.
Yeah.
Aren't
Is he doing these things right in front of you, or is he doing them when you're not seeing?
He is doing them. Like I'm in the house, but not all eyes on him.
Okay. That's number one problem. You really, and I know it's hard, you know, when you have a puppy, like sometimes it's easy, you know, like you think like, oh, it's just 10 minutes, you know,
Right.
like what's 10 minutes? But I'll tell you, these puppies can do a lot of shit in 10
They
minutes.
sure can.
So, you know, we made that mistake with certain things with our new puppy as well, but like we really quickly realized like we just got to keep eyes on him, you know?
Yeah.
Like, you know, it's even like if you're going to the bathroom for 5 minutes, like he's going with you, you know? Like if you need to go downstairs to grab something, he's going with you. Or if you're not going to do that, use your crate more, right? So puppies, the cool thing about puppies is that you could crate, like they're sleeping so much of the day that you could crate them so often throughout the day, it doesn't matter. So same deal, like a lot of times we look at the crate as like just for when we're leaving the house or just for like nighttime or whatever, you know? Where the most successful people with puppies use their crate all the time in the house, right? Again, if you're cooking or if you gotta hop on a call or something or whatever, just throw them in the crate, you know? Okay, so e-collar is going to be very similar to what we did with the leash. So we're essentially teaching that this pressure means the same thing as this pressure, right? So what we're gonna do is we're gonna start off with just some of the walking with him. The e-collar has 100 levels to it. Typically early on, especially with him, like we're gonna be not going any higher than a 5 for this first session probably. I'm trying to just get him feeling that sensation and just starting to make the correlation that it means the same thing as the leash, but this should be doing very little initially, you know? So what we're gonna be doing is I'm gonna be walking around here with him. And basically anywhere that I need to use the leash to help him, I'll just be pairing e-collar pressure into that as well. So if he gets ahead and I need to pull him back, I'll be engaging the e-collar while I do that. If I need to get him into a sit and use the leash, I'll be engaging the e-collar while I do that. Good job, buddy. Okay, all right, we're gonna add the beds back in. Bed. Good. Okay, we'll do all these perfect except the walking. He's like, nope, you want me to walk around. Pump the brakes. Bed. Good job. Okay, cool. So there are like a couple prerequisites with tug play that I like to see, right? So one is obviously they'll release it, which he clearly has no problem with that. Two is that they have good targeting, right? Meaning that when we present the tug, they'll bite it pretty directly where we want them to bite it, obviously. We'll take a look at that in a second here. And then two is that they'll bring it back to us if we release it to them, right? Like pretty easily. So let's start with targeting here. So what I want you to do, so do you typically always play with the handles?
Not necessarily.
Okay, what I want you to do is I want you to hold the tug itself and I want you to make that window where you want him to bite pretty small. It doesn't have to be crazy small, but small enough where he has a clear spot for it to have, right? And another thing too is when you give it to him, you're very stagnant with your, or at least right now, what I'm seeing, right? You're very stagnant with your release, right? So you're telling him break and you're kind of just holding it, letting him jump up for it. Yep. I want you to add some motion into it to increase the drive towards it, right? Yes. So try that a little bit here. Just tug with him, release him, have him come for it, add some chase to it and stuff. There you go. you go. Next thing I want to see here is, like I said, the bringing back of it. So what I want you to do is you're going to play with him here, play with him. There's going to be no outs involved in this. Whenever he gives a big thrash, like let him rip it out of your hands and then kind of run back and see if he'll bring that back to you. And the goal is that he brings it back without you needing to like reach in and get it, that you could kind of just keep motion going until he basically puts it back into your hand here. Right? And I want to see where organically his drive to do that is. If he, some dogs will just take it and then just fuck off, right? If we find that's the case, we would use a leash then to help teach this stuff.
Great.
Perfect. There we go. There you go. Perfect. You see how that time you used a lot more motion, which got that drive going with you. Even if he's already coming, try to just keep yourself, it doesn't have to be fast, but moving back with it, Cool. Cool. Yeah, give him a break. You let him chill out. So that we would want to see continue doing that until he started defaulting to, as soon as he let it go, driving it back into you, right? And we want to see that push, obviously with it, understanding that like you are the center of this game, obviously, right? Like, playing on his own and this kind of stuff is not rewarding or reinforcing at all, obviously. Now, a couple other things to pay attention to. Can I see the tug real quick?
Yeah.
Do you think he'll play with me?
Find out.
Little break. So you're doing a lot of up motions like this, up, right? So you gotta be aware of head positioning with a lot of this kind of stuff. There you go, bud, right? Out. Break. And the more you're pulling up like that, the more awkward it's gonna be for him to tug, which is gonna make it uncomfortable, right? So I try to keep the motions fairly parallel to keep that motion. And this is what I kind of mean about the tugging. See how he's kind of munchy with it, right? And obviously, some of that's just grip related, but I want to see him obviously realize that he can't munch around the tug, obviously. Hey.
I've always been like super confident.
Yeah, there's ways to fix that. Like once we get into like actually like doing back tide work with like a harness and stuff, that's how you fix a lot of that kind of stuff. But you don't want to be twisting the head around a hole all over the place, right? So you can be aware of that obviously with this, and then giving him more control of this game. See how I'm letting him really get reinforced with some of those motions. I'm not just waiting for the big ones. The more you kind of just like whip the dog around with it and stuff like that, the less fun it's going to be for them to keep trying. Like you want to do stuff like that, right? To build that drive. Come on, bud. Good mouse. Come on. Good mouse. Come on. Good mouse. Good job. There we go. So the big things with him from a tug standpoint, I want to see his drive come up a little bit more with it. And a part of that's going to be like having him feel like he has more control of the game. So really start like getting in tune with like all of the little motions he does and seeing if you could organically teach him those are like reinforcing things by letting him win little by little. And some of that could just be in your motions, right? And how you respond when he tugs to it, right? And some of that is going to be in the letting him win it and then having him drive it back into you. Okay. And then another part of it is going to be right now with your outs, they should just be super short and quick to keep that drive up high. Right? If anything, sometimes you could eliminate them altogether for the next couple times you play with them and just have it all play. Like, 2 or 3 minutes of just high drive, get that energy level like up to here and just like don't let it dip off kind of thing, And those are kind of the initial prereqs that I look for with stuff like this. Then what we would start doing is we would start incorporating this into, do you have like a harness for him by chance?
I don't, but I'm willing to get one.
Go pick up a fucking harness from somewhere. Honestly, you know who makes a good one for stuff like this is Roughwear, if you're familiar with the company. So Roughwear's like standard harness they sell is actually pretty good for bite work.
Okay.
Just the way that it's positioned, it's got a big chest plate on it that they can kind of push into and stuff. And what we would start doing then is we would start teaching him essentially how to play tug, dragging a line, because a lot of times when they start feeling that opposition initially, that'll kind of throw them off a little bit, you know? And that will help with the grip stuff, because what we would do then is we would start teaching him where you have that line, right? And you're just holding it, you're not pulling on it or anything. But if he starts getting munchy with it, I would apply back pressure, right? Where it would force him to grab tighter or else he's gonna lose it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there's the lines there.
Yeah, and that teaches them to get like a full grip where instead of grabbing like this, because here's the thing, even though it doesn't have those canines up there, that only affects if they're grabbing like this.
Yeah.
You know, we want him,
Really gripping from
gripping from all the way back, right? And that will teach him how to kind of develop that kind of a grip with that.
Okay.
But, you know, his tug game is there. I just want to see the drive higher with it, you know? Like he knows what to do and he understands the rules and stuff with it, but it's almost like he's just a little too reserved with getting really intense with it because of the rules, you know? Which again, per the conversations we've had numerous times, we want that with, you know what I mean? Like we want that, but like when you get into doing some of this kind of stuff, like, you know, rules and control is like the #1 enemy with this kind of stuff. Yeah, that's fine. And you know, again, the other positive in this situation, and this is something we see with almost every single dog we work with that has like reactive or aggressive behaviors, is in the house the dog is, you know, prior to training is going to be much more territorial. They're going to display a lot more of these types of behaviors. You know, that's pretty standard, but the fact that they're able to do good outside of those environments, and you used your friend as an example, as, you know, she watched her and she was really good with her when she watched her, but then when your friend came to the house a couple weeks later, it was like she never met her kind of thing. That's actually, you know, I know you were looking at that as like something concerning. That's actually positive to me because that shows that this is not this is an environmental problem, right? This is not a dog problem, right? This is not a she's a just unpredictable aggressive beast. This is just that something about the interactions in the home is making her feel like she needs to guard it really intensely. You know what I mean? This is not necessarily a concrete rule, but it's pretty close to a concrete rule for me, right? Like if I have people come over and we're gonna be having like a quote unquote party, right? Or like, you know, there's gonna be a lot of energy and people having fun and we're drinking and stuff like that, dogs typically go away, you know? You know, like, and again, there's exceptions, especially with Waffles, because he's just like a little idiot, you know, that doesn't do anything. And I'm sure Quinn is this way and stuff as well, right? Like, you know, like, it's one of those things where it's like, you could make some exceptions for it, but like Vinny, like he goes away, right? Deli, our other dog, like she goes away, right? Like Vera and Waffles, like sometimes we'll let them out, obviously, in those types of situations. But like, it's just one of those things where like, you just got to understand what social situations she likes and which ones she doesn't like, and help her out by one, if you are going to put her in those scenarios, to help build her tolerance to it, you just got to be on, you know? And if you're not going to be, that's okay. Just put her away and don't feel like you're like restricting her of all this enjoyment and stuff, because she probably doesn't want to be out anyways, you know? So she has plenty of time to enjoy you and your company, right? You do more than enough with these dogs, right? I see it every other day, you know what I mean? So I think it's just, you just gotta be a little bit more picky and choosy of the situations you're putting her in. Because I think right now, because you have such an active life with your dogs, I think you try too hard to incorporate her into everything, you know, which is fine, right? That's great. Like I love that mentality, but you know, some dogs, it just becomes too much for them, you know, and we wind up not weighing out like the risk to reward of the situation. So.
I think it's just like, here for you that I don't need to feel guilty to put her away if she.
Oh, for sure.
Great.
No.
I just really wanted a dog that, like.
I get it.
You know, like,
I get it.
Training,
Yeah.
You want to have them, like,
Yeah.
controlled enough and partake in your life, and it's just, well.
There's a difference though between being controlled enough, right? Because she is controlled enough, right? And if you're on, she is controlled enough. You know what I mean? It's just one of those things where it's like even me, like as a dog trainer, I am not going to be on all the time. You know what I mean? And I weigh out those situations where I'm not able to be that on, right? And I just don't put them in those situations because it's my job 100% of the time to set them up for success, right? And in those types of situations, if I'm not going to be on enough to address that situation how I need to, that's me setting them up for failure then at that point. Like, yeah, sure, right? Like, you know, she will stop reacting out the window because she doesn't want to get a really big correction. Like yes, right? But that's a short-term thing, right? The short term is initially like, oh wow, like I got this huge correction, so now I'm like scared to like go by the window or something like that. Like, yeah, there's going to be a little bit of that initially, right? But as she realizes, oh, okay, like as long as I don't react out the window, nothing bad happens. There will still be that like quote unquote fear of like, yeah, like, well, if I do go to do it, there's a correction and I'm quote unquote scared to get the correction, so I'm not going to do it. But it's not this like petrified, like I'm scared to go to jail, right? Like, you know, but like I don't live in constant fear of it all the time, right? Like I just know what not to do to avoid it, and I'm confident in what not to do to avoid it where it's not a problem, right? So it's kind of like that, right? Like we create that like mentality that that's like such a bad thing, right? Where it's like, yeah, like I don't want my dog to be scared of all of these different things. Like that's not the goal, obviously, but like I do want her to be very aware and motivated by the consequences for not doing things, especially when it comes to more dangerous behaviors, you know? A conversation I've been having with both the board and train trainers, mostly with them because it affects them a little bit more, I think, right now. But like myself and everything as well is like, you know, we know that there are massive pushes right now to have e-collars banned and stuff like that, right? We know that there's so much stigma around these types of tools, and we're gonna use them forever and ever until somebody tells us that we can't use them anymore, right? But something I've been thinking about, I would say, for the last couple of months quite a bit, is like as I look at a lot of trainers out there, right? And I look at, you know, different camps of training and people that use e-collars and this and that, blah, blah, blah. I've been kind of like taking mental notes of like, you know, let's say hypothetically e-collars got banned, right? There's gonna be a lot of fucking trainers out there that if that tool gets banned, they are gonna be absolutely shit out of luck, clueless as far as what to do with themselves because they're so reliant on this tool, right? So I've been pushing with like Seamus and Bridget in particular because they have more flexibility with this kind of stuff, but to look at the training that they're doing and start seeing like with some of this kind of stuff, how much can you lean into that positive side of things and how much, and to show them really how much you can get accomplished with just those types of things, right? So what I want to do here is I want you to, you're going to do basically a quick session with Bennett here, who pretty much knows everything at this point. Like he knows his down stays, he knows his bed stays, he knows his come commands, he knows his follow, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? But we're not going to use any actual corrections for it from an aversive standpoint. We're just going to be utilizing positive reinforcement and negative punishment if he doesn't do anything. So you're still going to use your no markers where you typically would, but the only reinforcement for this is either going to be getting the reward or the withholding of the reward. And I want to see you, initially you could start with just do some bed stays, then do some down stays, then do some come commands, but then start combining it, start testing it, start adding distractions in, and I want to see kind of where your timing's at with all that kind of stuff.
Okay.
thing I want to do here is we're going to do a little bit of socialization with him. Now, I'm sure I've asked you this before. Has he really interacted with many other dogs?
When I first got him, we've tried a couple of times. He met like a little tiny pug that he seemed to just sniff its butt a few times and he was okay with it and they went away. But then he met a more bigger, fluffier dog that wasn't so nice, and we got close, and that dog was very like reactive towards him. He got reactive back. We left. Then he saw another dog that didn't want to play, and he kind of lunged at it. But more recently, I have two neighbors that have dogs. One is a smaller dog, white fluffy. The other one looks just like him, but she's like 9 years old, very scrawny, very old, like slow moving. When he first met the 9-year-old dog, he wasn't that reactive. Now he sees it and he's just like super reactive, yeah.
Okay. And have all of these interactions been on leash, pretty much?
Yes, every single one.
That makes sense. You know, typically the reactivity is stemmed from the leash, so we may find when we go to do this off leash that he's totally different and he's fine. Let this play out for a minute or so here, and then what we'll do is we'll kind of talk about what we're seeing a little bit. I just want to supervise this right now, obviously. Psycho boy. See where we have a lot of emphasis to put on things. So here's the thing, right? So our kind of number one goal with socialization initially is to see how much the dogs can kind of figure out on their own. You know what I mean? I think it's extremely important for dogs, especially under-socialized dogs, to learn boundaries from other dogs. Because here's the thing, if I'm in a position where I have to micromanage every little thing that he does in order for the social interaction to go properly, that doesn't achieve anything. You know what I mean? I want him to figure out, you know, when he pushes boundaries in that like, overly intense way, that he's not going to get anything from the other dogs. They're not going to reinforce that by playing back with him, right? And then on the contrary, when they start to give him a little bit of attitude because he needs to back it off, I need for him ultimately to learn those cues as well. And a part of it is as they do it, you know, I kind of let it play out, because we're in a position where it's safe, nobody's going to get injured or anything like that, obviously. As he started continuing to escalate with it and it started just kind of just getting too much where like he would have needed to just correct him way too firmly in order to get him to stop doing that, obviously. That's where it's my job to then step in at that point. But here's the thing, even all of that, I would not necessarily consider that quote-unquote aggression, right? Aggression to me is like when you have dogs that have true like intent to do harm, right? What I see on all of that is a dog that's probably almost never been socialized in an off-leash way in his life, right? And two, all of that was just this bottled up explosion of freaking energy from all of the frustration and association with the leash, right? We know how leash reactive he is. We know how leash reactive he was when he first came in here, obviously. And we've done a good job of suppressing that on the walk so he can control himself when he sees other dogs, right? But now, we have two sides of the equation. We have to teach him how to ignore other dogs in places where it's not appropriate to socialize, but then we need to teach him when he's off leash how to actually interact with them, right? So that's kind of addressing the root of the problem. The correcting the reactive behaviors out on the walk is kind of addressing the symptoms of the problem, if that makes sense, right?
Makes sense, yeah.
And here's the thing, right? As soon as we step in and give a correction for it, he's like, whoa, I'm just gonna put myself over here for a minute, you know what I mean? And it went through these fluctuations where like, you know, they were sniffing each other for a little bit, right? Then he would just get so amped up. It's like whenever he showed that he was not interested, he would just get like so frustrated and pissed off that he wasn't interested. They just poked him like harder and harder and harder to try to get a rise out of him, where it showed itself in that like aggressive looking display, which absolutely could cause a dog fight, obviously, right? But it's not him inherently wanting to do harm on the other dog, right? Then tack on to, you can tell the frustration of the muzzle definitely adds some energy into the mix as well, which is a realistic thing he needs to learn how to work through, obviously. So.
A lot of improvements.
Yeah.
Yes.
Good.
Tons. I'd say most of her like aggression kind of stuff has been fairly under control. Now we're noticing mostly when we're like trying to do things with her. Nails, brushing, cutting out mats, cleaning her even, like if we need to
General
get,
grooming and handling.
yeah, if we need to like get in her feet, that's like a
Okay. What about, how's she at the vet?
great,
She's good at the vet?
which is annoying because they really get all up in everywhere.
Uh-huh.
There's times that like I get anxiety, like, oh man, is she gonna do anything?
Sure.
But she doesn't show any of the signs to them.
I gotcha.
Yeah, and it's not that we can't do stuff to her feet, but it's just a very
It's a fine line.
Yeah.
unstable. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
she's got me twice lately, and one I was getting snow out from her feet that was jammed in there. I tried to push her a bit forward to get the towel, and she was so, I think, just tense from me
Yeah.
getting at her feet that when I went to move her, she snapped.
I gotcha.
The other time we were in the shower, we were outside, her paws got muddy, so I took them up just to wash them down. I couldn't see her to see if she was raising her lips or anything, but I grabbed her front one on like the other side, and it was a kind of bad spot, but she snapped and
Yeah.
got my hand. So it's, but we've had her in the shower before and cleaned out her paws.
I gotcha. Yeah.
But it is something we're always kind of on guard,
Yeah.
trying to be.
Well, the positive thing is, like, when you message me about it, is grooming-related, like, aggression issues, right, are pretty common, and they're pretty simple to work through, you know? Because it's one of those things where it's a very predictable scenario of when she's going to display it, so we can always make sure we're in a position to either address it, or make sure that she's not in a position to actually fight us, which will also then,
Right.
obviously, continue to help her through that issue. Now, you said outside of that kind of stuff, where are you at with everything else?
I would say the only other time that I notice any kind of aggression is like if she gets surprised by something. So like mid-sleep the other night,
Yeah.
we didn't know she was in front of the ottoman. We moved it, and she like immediately snapped back around.
I gotcha.
Which wasn't, I don't think it was like necessarily either one of us, but just like,
Yeah.
Sure, just in general.
triggered
Yeah.
emotion.
It hasn't been like has it been, are you noticing it's more of just like the snap as opposed to before it was like it was like kind of snap plus some? Does that make
I
sense?
would say yes, it's scaled back a
Yeah.
bit, except for the grooming part. Like that, she
Yeah.
actually is making contact,
I gotcha.
and like her snarl is a fairly telltale sign that if you keep doing it,
Yeah.
that's exactly what's gonna happen. So the second she raises her lips, we like start correcting for that because
Yeah.
it gets her in a different state of mind, it seems, but
Yeah.
we don't always catch it.
You know, some of this kind of stuff, like, yes, corrections are very important for these types of things, right? Like, we want to obviously suppress these behaviors and correct these behaviors and stuff. But there's something to be said, you'll see here, there's something to be said about, like, when we get a lot of dogs in that have grooming-related aggression issues, just, you know, muzzling them up and just showing them simply, it just doesn't freaking work. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, there's really something to be said about that battle of wills and them just realizing, like, you can try this, and you're not gonna stop doing it because of this correction. You're just gonna stop doing it because
Right.
you realize, like, it ain't working with me right now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So we'll take a look at some of that kind of stuff and just go over some general grooming and stuff. We'll see how much we're able to get out of it here, obviously. But the big thing is we'll be able to put in place the building blocks so you can try it at home safely and then see what we get at home when you guys go to do it. And then at that point, if it's like drastically different than what we saw here, at that point just, you know, take videos of it so that I can see it, and then we can discuss adjustments and stuff we need to make from there.
Okay.
I feel like it's one of those situations where you take your car in, and tell him it's making a noise and it doesn't make a noise.
Truthfully, I kind of expect that she's going to be pretty good with this here, you know. The biggest thing I want you guys to see is if we do get anything, how we handle it more than anything, you know? Because like I said, let's say she were to turn around and just start snapping at my hand right now. Truthfully, most times I would just kind of hold and just wait for a second, you know, until she stopped on her own, and then I would jump right back into doing whatever I needed to. And my goal would be, if I absolutely needed to give a correction, I would, but if I could just get her realizing again that that behavior, that impulsive behavior because you're scared just isn't working, you know, that she's gonna learn a lot more from.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I've taken a trimmer to her paws to get some of the hair out on the bottoms. Yeah. So she has better grip, and like I was able to complete that without having an incident. I mean, she raised her lips a couple times, but
True.
So it's doable. It's just
Yep. It's the unpredictability with it, and it's the fact that when you're doing it, you're probably not doing it in a way where, like with the muzzle, like let's say moving forward right now, like anytime you're doing these grooming related things, just do it with the muzzle, so when you run into those one-off situations where she does try to do it, it doesn't derail everything. You know what I mean? Because if you're doing it and it's 99% of the time fine without the muzzle, but that one time it's not fine, you have to stop. There's no alternative.
Right.
You know what I mean? So you gotta be prepared every time you do it, so when you run into that one-off time, it's not a problem.
yeah, that makes sense. 'Cause I've been
Like this, for example, like the little snapping and stuff. Because we have that muzzle on, I'm in a position where it doesn't do anything. You know what I mean?
yeah. And I have been pretty discouraged as of late, especially after the second time.
Oh, of course.
Jogging.
Yeah. You know, I'm not super big into the whole, like, you know, dominance this, alpha that, this, that, you know what I mean? But there is something to be said about, like, she's realized that she's, like, superior than people in certain places when she can get away with these types of things. So as she's kind of essentially challenging me for doing these types of things, like, I'm just showing her that that's not working. And this is what you would consider to be, like, them kind of basically putting themselves into a submissive position then at that point. And then obviously being calm is so essential with this, you know? Like if she adds energy into things, like I'm not like feeding into it or anything.
Yeah.
Oh. Come on. That was one for sure. So I am glad that we're seeing a little bit of this though, so you can see again, it's just a matter of calmly working through it, you know?
Yeah. I mean, that last one right there, that was it. I mean,
Yep.
if you didn't have that muzzle on it, it was,
100%.
yep.
And that's typically where things would get derailed and we would end the session, you know? We'd have to, right?
Yeah.
And she's realized, like, wow, like I just tried and it didn't work, and we're right back to it. And you see now she's at the heavy panting and stuff because she's shocked. She's like, what the heck was that? Like, that didn't work. It usually does.
Yeah, and I feel like we saw that, not necessarily in like a learning sense as you were explaining it, but we saw Krista back when she did it,
Yep.
where she wouldn't let go. I
Yeah,
remember
for
that.
sure. Mm-hmm. It's the same concept, right? With any of these types of things, it's just she puts up a fight because it gets us to go away. Because she's doing it out of a fear place,
Yeah.
right? So it's, you know, obviously the same concept where she puts up the fight, we show her it doesn't work, she starts to get past that hurdle, you know? And as we encounter different types of hurdles, it's important for the dog to realize it. And frankly, because Krista worked through that early on, because we've done a lot of that kind of stuff with her here when she gets, you know, nails and stuff like that done and stuff like that. That's why she's so much better here, is because she's tried some of these fights on a more minor scale and they haven't worked. She's just had more victories with you guys. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's where kind of doing drills like this and working through some of this kind of stuff at home is going to be really big, because she's going to have less and less of those victories, which means she's going to have less and less attempts.
Yeah.
So, and you guys, again, have done a really great job of mitigating most of it, right? This is just the biggest last hurdle. We're really getting intrusive. We're really doing things she doesn't want us to do, you know? And she's got to learn to kind of tolerate that to some extent.